Or gossiping, that is bad and it is a sin. So it was like gossip, adultery, murder, dancing, drinking, right? And
I mean, that's like a good ranking.
Yeah, that seems right.
Yeah, I thought it was my space, and there was just so much.
To the Harbor Grace excursion with the boys to have a time.
I'm Kelsey. This is
I'm
Sarah. We're happy to be here with you to gab for an hour.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, I know you were already told about the gossip, but we are going to read those aloud later. So if you already put secrets in there you don't want read aloud, too late.
Just so you guys know, this is our first time meeting in person after knowing each other for so long.
Isn't that beautiful? The internet can make friends.
It's really beautiful. I texted her, I was like, wait a second, we've never met.
It was one of those moments. I feel like whenever you meet someone online, the question is always, how tall are they? Every time. It's like, well, I wonder.
Do you think I was tall?
I didn't. I thought we'd be the same height.
Oh my God. No, it's one of my defining characteristics.
Yeah, one of my defining characteristics is that I think that I'm the same height as everyone. So.
Also, mine is that I don't look at short people and think of them as short. Like, everyone's 5'7" to me.
Thank you.
So, I don't know how. You're 5'7". Actually, I was going to start with a different question, but you made me think of something while we were in the back talking about, work and how people kind of like know you. Like how, when I think of you, because I've known you as a writer first, of articles and journalism, and then you kind of start this podcast, you write this book, and it's just such a different way for people who maybe got to know you through listening to normal gossip, are like knowing you in this new way and your thoughts on gossip and everything. So how has that been, just kind of presenting yourself differently?
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, I started my career as a journalist. I've written my whole life. I wrote a novel that came out in 2021. And then we started this podcast, and I always viewed it as a writing gig because I wrote the scripts for all of the episodes, and the scripts were 4,000 words long. So I was like, I'm writing all the time. Everyone thinks of me as a writer, and then people started introducing me as a podcaster, and I was like, oh no. Things are going so badly, mostly just because I think of like a very specific type of person when I think of podcasters, not us. We're different.
No, we're different. And not only were you writing the podcast, you were writing articles too, like you were still doing your other writing.
Oh yeah, I have a disease. It's incurable. It's called posting disease. And if I don't post enough, I'll die.
I need that disease. So having read the book, I mean, I feel like there was such an kind of like interesting way of, dividing these chapters of historically like what gossip has meant to people, your own relationship to gossip. But I guess, how was it for you as you kind of started taking gossip seriously in like a professional sense, kind of valuing it as a real form of storytelling and not something that, is frivolous or bad? Because you do get into it a little bit later with your own journey, but yeah.
The book is a real treat for me because we would have these meetings where we would do the run through for the story before the guests would come on. And I would always come into the meeting and I would be like, guys, I read a scientific study. And everyone would be like, Kelsey, no. No one wants that. And I would be like, but it's really interesting. Like, I promise this thing about gossip is interesting. And they were like, no, this is a storytelling podcast. And I was like, you're so right. And they were always right. But so it's really nice to have this book where I was able to like kind of spend some time with the thoughts that I had and the things I wanted to talk about that didn't belong on the podcast, that had like a little more depth to them.
Yeah, one of the things you kind of touch on is how gossip is weaponized in a way. Can you get more into that, of just, coming to that conclusion and seeing how it played out in your life?
Sure, the way that we like demonize gossip?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I grew up evangelical. Famously, I am an American. And in the evangelical culture, there are some sins that are like gradation sins. So it's like you can dance, but not in some ways. right? You can like talk, but not in some ways. And gossip was a really black and white sin in the way I was taught it. It was like, if you are gossiping, that is bad and it is a sin. So it was like gossip, adultery, murder, dancing, drinking, right? And
yeah,
so,
I mean, that's like a good ranking.
yeah, it seems right.
Yeah.
And it was, I did think it was right though at the time, and it was really hard for me to kind of understand that this was something that I just couldn't not do. I was constantly being told to stop gossiping. I was constantly being told that like my biggest sin was that I was a gossip. And I was like, well, the problem is I can't stop. And I really couldn't. Like, I just needed to retell things to people deeply. As I said, posting disease. I didn't have social media as a child, so I had to talk.
You invented posting.
Yeah, I invented posting.
Yeah. It was verbal. It was in the moment. It didn't last for,
Yeah, exactly. And so it was really hard for me to like deal with this. And it's not that like gossiping made me stop believing in the church. I had already stopped believing in the church, but it made me realize that like a lot of these sins that I had been taught as black and white were actually much more complicated than that. And when you look at gossip in particular, it is something that is used specifically against women, specifically against people who are not high ranking in the church. And there were several instances where pastors stood on the stage and said, if you feel tempted to gossip, simply come to a member of leadership and tell them instead. Yeah, that's crazy.
Just come and spill the tea here.
It's wild. But like literally everyone in these giant auditoriums would be like, yes, okay. And it's like, no. Like you should not have to give every piece of information to people who are in authority over you. That is very dangerous. And so that is like something I think about a lot, is how gossip is used by people in lower positions in society, whatever that is made by, to kind of steal power from people who have it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of also what I was thinking with like it being kind of used against people in this way where, you know, you think about all the types of gossip you hear and it's like, you know, as you get into later on in the book, just how that can help people who might need help or aren't able to speak up for themselves. And yeah, I found that just so interesting. And how was that when you were kind of researching a lot of the more historical elements to gossip? Like you reference a lot of religious texts, you reference, you know, stuff I've never heard of, but also it's just I was like, I legit didn't know what that was. But yeah, I feel like it's so like, how do you go about that research of like trying to kind of hone in on this point that it's always existed, it's always been controversial or seen as this way?
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy. The universal is just like clear. Like children gossip about each other. You don't have to like teach them to do it. They just say like, this kid's parents are divorced, and you're like, thank you so much. Very helpful. And so it's like people have done it forever, and we know people have done it forever because people have been getting in trouble for it forever. And so most of the records, like paper famously does not last that long, so most of the oldest records we have about people being like prosecuted for gossip are from like the 15th and 16th centuries. And it's people being like mostly women, being put into like iron, what are called iron tongues, which is where they would just like shove a piece of iron in your mouth that was connected to a headdress so that you couldn't talk. Like I would be dead. They would have burned me at the stake. And that is really fascinating, right? Because we can see this evidence that's coming through, that people have always done this and always will. Like we know that many people who still live in tribal communities, like they are gossiping constantly. It is just like part of who we are.
Can you kind of going back to what you were saying with, you know, realizing there was a lot of discrepancy between like who was allowed to get gossip and who wasn't? I guess, do you remember when you started kind of taking it more seriously as a concept instead of something that you just shouldn't feel guilty doing?
Oh, that's a good. Okay, here as a reporter, whenever someone says that's a good question, they're stalling for time.
And you know what? That's how you know you've won.
That's how you know
as
you
someone
won.
asking questions.
Yeah.
So I got you.
Yeah, yeah. Take a tally. Good one. This is also a real problem with being a reporter who's asked questions. Is I started to say that's a really good question, then I was like, shit, she's gonna know. That was not your question at all. Your question was, when did I start thinking about it more critically? And I think the answer, I started thinking about it in relationship to the church when I was working on my first book, which is a novel about an evangelical pastor who has an affair. Are we sensing a theme here? And when I was doing that, I was like, oh, I want to know how these churches actually work. I want to know how they actually like prosecute people who have misbehaved. And when I was doing that, I was reading all of these articles about how they had been through like, essentially they had learned to apologize and then just been reinstated. And I was like, this is nuts. And so it made me start thinking about like, okay, well, where does this information come from? And I was just reading a lot of blogs from people who were like, oh yeah, my abuser is the head of this church and I came forward and no one cares. And I was like, well, that seems really bad. And it makes sense to me that they would want to demonize gossip then. And so I think that was probably 2019, 2018.
Wow. And you do also kind of get into this idea of like the ethics around gossip and what is considered ethical. Did any part of how you kind of saw things change as you were writing this and researched, or was it more kind of reaffirming these things like you knew to be true, but with like actual like real proof of this makes sense?
In terms of like my own
relationship just like
to
your
gossip?
own, and just like I guess the ethical side or what people consider ethical or non-ethical when it comes to that.
Yeah, I think I've kind of come to realize that most, and this is not my opinion, there are studies that show this, that most gossip is neutral. Most of the time when you are talking about other people, it is just to communicate information to someone else. It's just to say like, this person was at the party. That's a value neutral judgment most of the time.
Unless they shouldn't have been there.
Unless he shouldn't have been there. Exactly.
And then he's bad.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I mean, I make this joke constantly to men at bars, because I live in Philadelphia, and they will often be like, oh, what are you working on or whatever? And I'm like, oh, I wrote this book about gossip. And they're like, oh, I don't care about that. And I'll be like, oh, did you hear that Jalen Hurts got traded? And they freak out. And I'm like, well, look who cares about gossip now. But it's like, yeah, because sports rumors, I know it's a really good joke. You can all have it. Sports rumors are talked about in a neutral tone. Political rumors are talked about in a neutral tone. Like the way that we talk about them is like my source said. And your source is usually a friend of a friend, right? Like it is, most reporters when they're talking about their sources are talking about people that they know personally or that are connected to people who they know personally. So it's a tone that determines whether it's like morally good or morally bad. Obviously, within reason, you can use gossip for moral evil if you want to. Or moral good. But it's a tool, right? You can use it however you want.
Okay, now you just got me thinking of something else, which is...
See, now I get a point. For those of you keeping score, it's
actually,
1-1.
No, you didn't. You didn't. I was thinking about it before I was being nice.
Okay, so it's still 1-0?
As someone who does talk a lot of shit and does gossip quite a lot myself, I do feel like lately I've been feeling kind of bad. Not bad where I'm like, man, I'm sorry, that was so gossipy. Where I'm like, should I have... Like, there's still like, I feel like even though I 100% agree with you, and when I was reading the book, I was like, yes, totally. And then but I still can't shake this guilt, you know?
I feel like on this tour, people have been asking me a lot, a question that I don't have the answer to, and I apologize in advance if any of you asked it in the bucket, but they're like, how do I know when it's evil gossip? Like, how do I know when I'm across a line? And unfortunately, the answer to that is you know it in your body.
Okay, so you're saying I'm evil.
No, I'm saying that like the first thing I would ask is like, who are you doing it with? Because
random stranger. I'm joking.
See,
I'm joking. It's not random strangers. It's my best
friends.
friend.
That would be a very easy problem because it's like you don't gossip with people you don't trust.
I think for me, I'm just kind of like, oh, like they didn't ask. You know what I mean? Or like
you're just barging into rooms like, guess what?
No. I guess it's like this feeling of like, if someone brings someone up and I hate them for this specific reason that is gossip, I don't need to bring it up when I hear their name every single time. You know?
Okay, agree to disagree.
Where like someone will be like, hey, did you know? I'm like, yeah, fuck her. And I'm like, no, like I don't need to do that.
Yeah, I think this is a problem also if something I have noticed is like people congregate around their type, right? So like if you're here, most of your friends are the type that are like, oh my God, she did what? Like, we hate her, why? Like, any of you could turn to the person next to you and be like, here's my enemy on Instagram, block her. And they would. They would, because you're all the same. And you're all like us.
Yeah.
And I think the problem is sometimes you're handed someone who is not like handpicked by you, right? Like you're in a room with strangers, or like someone brings their boyfriend somewhere. And then you say something like this, and you're immediately like, oh no.
Wow,
I've
that's
made a huge mistake.
actually exactly it.
Yeah, the problem isn't the gossip, the problem is the people, the company.
Yeah, I'm honestly not that mean though. You guys don't know me, but I'm not that bad, you know.
Yeah, I believe you.
I guess that's it.
I want to be clear, I am. I have a list of enemies on my phone. And I have a list of enemies that are my friends' enemies, so that I don't forget. That's not a joke.
You kind of made me think also that all news is kind of gossip, or like, where is, I guess, the line for you of what is considered, like, where do you think the line is of kind of sharing information in a way that is necessary and the idea of gossip, you know, like where does one end and one begin? If it is, you know, something that has very little to do with you, or a story about someone else.
Sure. So I think often, right, the title of the book is You Didn't Hear This From Me, which is a joke, because in fact, you are hearing it from me. I'm the one writing it. That's the whole point. And what part of the reason for that is that I think that the real difference between like gossip and news, or gossip and information sharing, is that gossip exists in like a spirit of doubt. You are telling the person across from you, like, this is what I think happened, but I'm not sure. When you are information sharing, you are saying, this happened and you need to know.
But I'm sure of my gossip.
Oh, okay. Well, you're different.
Sorry. Oh, that's the difference. Yeah. Okay. That actually does lead us into something that I think was really interesting to read about, was kind of this new era of celebrity gossip, where it's not so much tabloidy, but it's blogs with blind items, it's deux mois, it's, you know...
Filed lawsuits.
Yes. You know, there's just all of this stuff that is just kind of, you know, unverified, could be sent by anyone. You know, you have like a story in the book, before chapters, there's a story of gossip, and there's someone who mentions giving in fake deux mois tips after giving in a real one.
Yeah, if you haven't read the book, in between the chapters, there are quotes that like people sent to me for me to use in the book, which was very kind of them. And so the one you're talking about is one where someone says, like, I sent in a fake tip to deux mois. She published it, and now I do it all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, can you show me some examples? Because obviously I was like, well, I want to know what this person is submitting. And she did. She was like, here are the things I sent. Here's the proof that she posted it. And I was like, thank you so much. Because, like, one, I needed to know. And two, it is really interesting to think about the fact that, like, sites like deux mois, which have existed forever, right? Like, I navigate every day to a website that I think was built in the year of our Lord 2003 and has not been updated since then, that is just blind items. It's just celebrity blind items, and I just read them every day for my own edification. And I think a lot about the fact that, like, those are being presented as, like, this is a blind item for you to figure out. That carries with it a healthy degree of skepticism. Mm-hmm. If you follow deux mois, she has a podcast, she has a book, you can listen to those things and consume those things. You could eventually convince yourself that this is a person that is like your friend in a parasocial way, and then you would be like, well, she wouldn't lie to me.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, she's literally publishing lies.
Yeah, you mentioned, you know, entitlement gossip when it comes to celebrities, and, you know, tying a lot of exactly what we're talking about into celebrity breakdowns and,
yeah,
you know, how women are treated. So, yeah, I think you've written about this before just in your regular writing, but I'm so curious what it was like, you know, comparing that with the idea of gossip and what's considered, you know, correct or incorrect.
Yeah, so I write about this idea that I came up with and titled entitlement gossip, which is this idea that right? Like you're looking at your Instagram and a girl you went to high school with clearly got a divorce, but she hasn't posted anything about that. And you're like, I should get to know about that because I'm invested, I'm engaged, I care.
I follow her.
I follow her, I'm a fan, right? And in that situation, you know this person, right? Like, so you could, and some of us do, DM them and be like, did you get a divorce? Right?
Or you DM someone that knows them and ask.
You can, yeah. You can like research that information. But what's interesting is like, I find myself doing this sometimes where I'll be like looking at Instagram and I'll see like, you know, some celebrity seems like she's broken up with her boyfriend. And I'm like, well, how come I don't get to know? And it's like, you don't know her. Like, it's like a crazy brainworm to have where I'm convinced that like I deserve this information. And I find that really interesting because it's like celebrities are both using parasocial relationships to gain money and attention and a lot of things. And also they are people you don't know, which does not mean that you get to just run over every boundary they have. So it's messy, is my answer.
Yeah, I mean, also there's such a, you mentioning that, I mean, there is such a crazy balance between it where on the one hand, you know, someone capitalizing off giving me access to them in this way or making believe that I know them, and then, you know, this idea of an audience wanting more. And,
right, like you see this, the best example of this is Taylor Swift because she's like the biggest star in the world. And you will see people saying like, well, I deserve to know if she's gotten engaged or not. I'm her fan. She owes me that. And it's like, she gave you music. That's the thing she's trading for your fandom. It's songs, right? And so then it's like, well, but do I want to know? Yes, right? So like we're all in this weird space with these people who we don't know, who are megastars, who have millions of dollars, and to give us something, and we always want more.
Do you think there's any way for, I guess, someone in that position to even be able to navigate how their fan base speaks to them and others? Like, I guess, like, even just thinking of it that way of, you know, it's like its own machine and it's depersonalized from that person
I think
at that point.
Part of why Taylor Swift is such a good example here is that people teach their fans how to engage with them. And she has consistently rewarded over time people like doing, I don't know, like 12-dimensional chess with like posts that she posted 6 years ago and being like, this means that this album is coming on this night. And then she's like, this person's correct. And it's like, what? What are you talking about? And I think a lot about, I saw Boy Genius in concert last year at some point in the past. And for one song, Phoebe Bridgers comes out and she says, put your phones away. Like, I want to do this song without phones. And I watched the girl next to me. She then like walks through the stage. You haven't seen video, like through the stands. Like she was within like 10 feet of everyone. You haven't seen videos of this because she tells people not to use their phones. I watched the girl next to me slap her friend's phone out of her hand because she like instinctually was like, oh, Phoebe's walking toward me, time to record. And her friend was like, no, Phoebe said no. And it's like, so she taught you. Right? Which means you can, on some level, teach people how you want to be interacted with. And so I think that is like a big question for celebrities right now. And you'll notice, I think a lot of younger celebrities are setting those boundaries a lot earlier. Like Chappell Roan is doing that right now, saying like, here's how I want to be interacted with, here's how I don't want to be interacted with. People are going to ignore them when they want to ignore them, but I think that's a good idea.
Do you think it's more common than people think where celebrities are planting gossip about themselves or... You know, like...
Did you know?
Oh, go off.
If you are photographed by a TMZ photographer, you had to call them.
Yeah.
Someone has to call them. They don't just lurk around. You have to call them and say, come to my house and take my photo.
Yeah, and near someone's home, if they're out on the town, like 100%, someone's called.
Yes.
And they're on your team and they... Yes.
Yeah, it's your publicist or your ex's publicist. Or
I mean, it's great when it's obvious, where it's like that video of Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello walking very slowly. Have you seen that one? It's like them holding hands, walking extremely slowly, so people take photos of them. And it's like a zombie slow crawl kind of thing.
I love that you asked me if I had seen that. Like, that makes me feel really good because I've seen it so many times.
Okay, I mean, I knew you did, but I had to like play the part for like people with real lives.
I appreciate that. Fun fact I learned about Camila Cabello recently, positive, not derogatory, is that when I was in Los Angeles for the book show, I was like, oh, do celebrities come into the bookstore? And he was like, yeah, you know who comes in the most? Camila Cabello. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, she's reading the classics right now. She bought War and Peace last week.
Oh my God, that changes everything.
It really changes everything.
That actually changes like everything.
You start being like, wait.
Like, she's gonna start making references in her songs.
I know. She's so smart.
Wow, who knew? They should get, I mean, maybe people should be paying the bookstore to push their books on Camila Cabello.
Certainly they should, yeah.
Can you please make sure Camila is photographed?
Please hand this to Camila.
I mean, in your own, I guess, since you've kind of been known as the queen of gossip, like not derogatory, like as someone who, you know, has really made a name for themselves in talking about gossip in a real serious way and a fun way, what has been, I guess, recently, can you think of any gossip you heard about yourself where you're like, wait a second, or like, does gossip come back to you about yourself? Has that happened
about
recently?
myself? No. Most gossips are also very good at keeping secrets, so no. But I have had a situation where like, I heard a gossip, what I call fixed it, which means I like rearrange the order that it's told in and like add jokes. I fixed it. I made it into a voice memo. I sent the voice memo to like 4 people, including Bobby Finger, which at that point you're just distributing news. And then like several months later, it was like a full year later. A full year later, I was at a wedding and this girl comes up to me and she's like, I heard a gossip that you're gonna love. And I'm like, this happens all the time. And I'm like, great, lay it on me, babe, I want it. And then she proceeds to tell me beat by beat.
I think
the same story with the same jokes.
1,000% think I know which one you're talking about.
You probably do. It's like beat by beat. She had it. And I was like, thank you so much. Actually, that's my gossip. You told it to me. And she was like, no. I heard it from my friend. She was like really dug in. She was like, no, I heard it from my friend who was at this place with this person. And I was like, okay, I'm going to send you the voice memo that I recorded 12 months ago.
So
and you can compare
exciting.
them.
That is honestly incredible. That you were the beginning and the end in a way, you know?
Yeah.
It came
I'm
right
the
back
problem.
to you. No, but I feel like.
But it was so interesting because she was so certain.
Had a lot of details changed by then, or
No.
like how was it? Was it a game of telephone?
It had changed. There were a couple of things that had changed, but mostly what had changed was the location and when it happened. Because she was like, no, this happened to my friend on this date in this place, and I was like, I promise you that it did not. Wow, it's fun.
That is so fun. I'm trying to think of all the crazy shit I know that might have been passed down from generation to generation.
I know.
Yeah. I'm dying to know what it is. Is there anything that, I mean, how does it feel now knowing when you get like real good gossip?
I get to just like have it.
Yeah, where you're just like, I'm sure people tell you things more than they ever have, right?
Yeah. A funny thing about me is that I have a really, really terrible memory. And so often someone tells me a gossip and I'm like, thank you so much. And then it immediately leaks out the back of my head and I have no memory of it. And then like months later, someone's like, do you remember this? And I'm like, no, I have no memory of that
and you're
at
like,
all.
who told you?
Yeah.
And then you start the chain again.
And you can't, like, a big belief I have is that you shouldn't be writing this down. Like, you shouldn't be writing gossip down in a way that's going to incriminate you in a court of law. And so then it's like, well, then I just don't know anymore, which is nice. So I'm excited to relearn all the stories that I've forgotten and to learn new stories.
Wow. I mean, that's really beautiful. I'm really touched by your commitment to this.
Thank you.
To like relearn everything. I feel like I had one last thing, but I feel like we did cover basically everything I had. So do you want to get into the
bowl? Okay, yes, whoever has the bowl, bring it, but don't hurry. I'll
And
tell
I'm
a
gonna
story.
do something brave,
while
and
it
I'm
gets
gonna
up here.
pour you water in front of a bunch of people.
Good luck. No one look at Sarah. Okay, I will tell you a story while we're waiting for this bowl to get up here. A funny thing happened to me on this tour, and so it's a good gossip. Would you like to have a little gossip as a treat? Thank you. Okay, so I live in Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Eagles won the Super Bowl, which is a big deal in America, but it's a bigger deal in Philadelphia. I watched a man probably having sex with a woman on the street. It was it was insane. People were lighting fireworks. It was chaos. I walked by a man who was just pouring vodka into people's mouths in a row. And I was like, this is great, but I literally the next day had to go to New York to launch the book. So I was like, I've made a huge mistake.
It's beautiful that
I
you
know.
had 2 wins,
I know. Isn't that nice? So I go to the parade. I have a great time. Or not the parade, I'm sorry, just the celebration on the street that was not sanctioned. I go to the celebration on the street that's not sanctioned, and then I go to sleep. I wake up the next morning. I get into a ride share to go to the train station. And the Uber driver, whatever he is talking really, really rapidly in Spanish. And I, thank God, have taken 4 years of Spanish. Mm-hmm. So I speak, I would say, just enough to be conversational. So I can understand what this man is saying. And I'm like, I know that I do not look like I speak Spanish, so I'm simply going to sit very quietly in the back of this car and listen to this man's one side of his conversation. And so he's talking, and what he's talking about is how he told his girlfriend that she was pretty enough to go on Love Island.
Oh.
What a compliment. It went straight to her head. And she broke up with him. She was like, well, if I'm pretty enough to go on Love Island, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to go on Love Island. So she broke up with him. She tried to go on Love Island. I'm sitting in the backseat of this car. This man's talking on the phone. He's like, and then I go to Broad Street, where the big party is last night, and I see her on the shoulders of my best friend. What you did is what I did in the back of the car. My cover was blown instantly. He was like, oh no. And I was like, he was like, I'm so sorry for talking on the phone. And I was like, no. I'm loving this. He was like, do you want me to hang up? I was like, could you just put him on speaker? He was like, yeah. So he puts his best friend on speaker, his other friend, and they're just talking shit about this guy for 10 minutes. And I was like, this is incredible. I love this so much. And then he was like, all right, and now we're here. And I was like, no. But you can't ask an Uber driver to be conferenced into their call. That's not appropriate. So that's unfortunately the end of that story because I had to leave.
Oh my God, that is.
I know. Can you believe
I'm
that?
rocked by that, and I love that he was trying to boost her confidence and was like, "You're so beautiful. You could go on Love Island."
Yeah. Honestly, if anyone here dates women and is here without someone that you're dating,
That's the nicest thing you could say to a woman.
It's a good. I think it's a nice compliment.
It's a nice compliment. That means you're
They're all
bodacious. It means you're
hot.
a stunning woman.
Yeah. You're 10 for sure.
Yeah,
Which
absolutely.
I love for his ex-girlfriend, I guess.
She was like, I'm a baddie.
She was like, well.